Gippsland is an area located in the southeast of Victoria, Australia. Spanning over 41,000 square kilometres, this is an area of immense beauty. Snowy mountain peaks, endless bushland, rivers and valleys, and lakes, estuaries, and the rugged coastline. The area holds much value in its natural beauty, as well as economic, with farmland, mining, logging, and more. The Gunai and the Bunurong people were the largest Indigenous groups frequenting this area over the years. They travelled from mountains to coastline with the seasons, living off the land for many years. In this video, I want to look at the European pioneer history of the area though, from the mid-1800s to early 1900s, when men and women moved into the area seeking a new life, their fortune, or perhaps even to escape society. I'm heading to Old Gippstown, a recreated pioneer town with real authentic buildings from the frontier era that have been relocated to give a glimpse into life on the Gippsland frontier. I want to discover more about the men and women who lived in this wild landscape. G'day everyone, so today I'm in a place I've always wanted to come to, and this is Old Gippstown. Now this was opened in the 1970s, but basically they've got a bunch of buildings here that were relocated to this one particular spot in Maui. And some of the buildings date back to the 1840s. So it's from the era from the 1840s to, the early 1900s, 1940s. And it's the pioneer era of this area of Gippsland. And historic buildings here, lots of information. It's pretty good. It's only $15 entry for adults. And so, yeah, I just want to go around and I want to have a look at some of the old buildings, and I also want to explore some of the history of Gippsland as well and share some of that history with you. And stores like this would have been common in the townships. This is the Narrabeen store, where you can buy your odds and ends and your supplies and things like that. So it covers 3 acres and it has 23 buildings from the from that pioneer era of Gippsland, and including a house from a very famous pioneer in the Gippsland area, which I'm excited to check out. But yeah, let's go have a look around. So these are bow wagons, and these were common in the 19th century, and particularly for using agricultural products around, and bags of wheat and wool and things like that, and from township to township, and bring them to the stores, local stores where people could buy them. So horse-drawn carts. The way things are going, who knows, maybe we'll be going back to horse-drawn carts in the future. And this particular log cabin is from the 1880s, and these kind of cabins were what pioneers would have built out in the bush. I mean, have a look at this. This is stringy bark. How's that for a window? That is absolutely really, really cool. It's just amazing to think of how they lived back then. Let's go inside and check it out. Log cabins like this were very, very popular in the pioneer days of Gippsland and all around Australia really. They would have to make do with the resources around them. They couldn't bring in building materials where they'd set up on the frontier, so they would bring this kind of stuff with their horse and carts, their pots and pans and their lanterns and things like that, but everything else needed to be built from what they could find around them. Even the stone, and I love the bark slabs as well. And I've built my own bark hut before as well, but this is obviously a lot more developed, a lot bigger, but you can imagine how breezy it would be. You'd really have to fill in the gaps. Gippsland was one of the later areas of Victoria to be explored in colonial times. Whalers and sealers had settled along her coastlines from the late 1700s and early 1800s, and a Samuel Anderson had established a squatter settlement on the Bass River in 1835. The area around Western Port developed first, and also around Omeo, where squatters had pushed into, but the vast land in between had not been explored until the 1840s. Angus McMillan, who I'll mention later, was credited with much of the original unofficial exploration of the rivers of Gippsland, but it was another explorer who was the first to navigate a path from east to west across Gippsland. Paul Edmund Strzelecki led an official expedition across the area, and on this journey he gave it the name that stuck today. I named this tract of country Gippsland in honour of His Excellency Sir George Gipps. And so Gippsland was named after then Governor of New South Wales and the sponsor of the trip. The hardships were many for Paul. including crossing over what would later be called the Strzelecki Ranges, where for 22 days they were on the edge of starvation, mostly saved by the knowledge of their indigenous guide Charlie. But then, on the 12th of May 1840, they reached Western Port Bay, the first European party to cross the eastern lands of Victoria, and Powell noticed that this was a land fertile for settlement. The country is well watered and richly grassed. And from here on, pastoralists and squatters started settling into the area. So this building was built by a Benjamin and Elizabeth Ashton in 1894, and it's blue gum and ashwood, I do believe, that they used to build this house. And this is typical of a homestead that you might have found. The old fellas would move into an area and they'd set up a settlement, and usually they'd build like a bark hut, which I showed previously, and then over time they'd build up something a little bit more established like this. And this is your kind of typical homestead that you might have after a number of years that they've kind of settled into a place. I have the exact same lantern as that. Meat safe. Keep your meat in there, keep the rats away. How's this for a cooker? Fantastic. Now how's that for an old bathtub? And this is what I've really wanted to come and check out. Now this has a lot of history where I am right now. This is called Bushy Park. This was built in the 1840s, 1848 I do believe, and this was the homestead of Angus McMillan. Angus McMillan is a very well-known, popular but controversial figure in Gippsland's history. He is the true pioneer of Gippsland in the sense that he was the first European to really explore this area in depth. And even though he didn't get to name the name Gippsland, that went to Paul Strzelecki, he did name a lot of the rivers in this area, and those names stuck. And this was his homestead that he had on the Avon River. Angus McMillan, a Scottish immigrant, is a controversial figure in Victorian history. His achievements include being the first real European explorer in the area. Even before Paul Strzelecki, Angus had established himself as a pastoralist and was already naming rivers like the Mitchell, the Avon and the McAllister. As settlement into the area increased, sadly so did conflict between European and Indigenous. Battles and massacres occurred, and in recent times, McMillan's reputation as a brave explorer was tarnished for his role in leading armed assaults on the Kurnai people and the Warrigal Creek massacre. His great-great-niece, Carl Flynn, wrote a book on his accounts, In Thicker Than Water, about her discoveries of some of the gruesome details of Gippsland's history. Another book by Rob Christie was published called A Convenient Scapegoat, Angus McMillan and the Gippsland Massacres, which challenged some of the accusations. In the end, McMillan died poor and bankrupt, a squatter on the Avon River, and killed in 1865 after a pack horse slipped and crushed him while clearing a track near Dargo. The achievements and the bloody reputation of this Scottish man turned explorer, squatter and armed combatant still remain today. Now, this home here was built in 1880 by a single lone female occupant. She lived here, and it's set up as a kitchen outhouse where the farmhands and labourers would come in to get their food. Their food would be cooked here, and then they'd all come in and have their supper from here. And there was a lot of workers in the Gippsland region. You had farmhands, you had loggers, you had miners, you had pastoralists, obviously. So yeah, Gippsland had a booming industry in the mid-1800s, late 1800s, early 1900s, in all these kind of areas. The old outhouses, better than doing it out in the bush, probably not as nice as the outhouses we have today. And obviously, before they had internet and Facebook and obviously YouTube, what you're watching on now, they had the printing press, and that's how they got their information and news out. It was very important to them, and local townships would often have their own newspaper and their own printing press that they would deliver news to. So it was a big part of our history as well. It's interesting to think about how much things have developed now in regards to how we get our information and our news and we learn from, but it was so limited back then, and they made do with what they had. And it's really, you have to admire it, don't you? Just the ingenuity of it all with the little that they had and how they were able to operate as a society and, you know, get information out there. And obviously a lot less than what we have today, but sometimes I wonder if that's a little bit better. Sometimes we're bombarded with so much information, so much news from around the world. I don't know if our minds are meant to handle that much information all at once. So yeah, I think slowing down and, you know, reading the newspaper back in the day that maybe came out on a Sunday or something like that, I think it was probably a better way to be present and not so distracted and have your mind fragmented with all the crap that's going on in the world at the moment. So yeah, simpler times, that's for sure. Now here we have a miner's hut, and this was built, I believe, in 1900, situated on the Tangel River for two miners. Now Gippsland has a lot of history with mining, starting, you know, from around the 1850s. Now a lot of miners would build cottages and huts like this, and it's basically what you call a slab hut. As you can see over here, this stringy bark slab, shingles for the roof, and this is how they built their huts. And it's actually really cool in there. I'm going to go have a look, but I have a hut that I built on my property, a similar kind of thing, a little humpy, a little miner's hut. Let's go have a look. Fantastic. This is a classic chair that they used to build in their houses out of hessian, and I'm going to build one just like this one time. I have actually built a very similar style bed in my own hut, which I slept in before, so this is interesting to see. And obviously hessian was a common material used. Doesn't look very comfortable, does it? But yeah, that's what they would have slept in, and it looks very huntsman-y. These kind of huts were notorious for having spiders and snakes in them, and rats, with all the cracks and stuff that you have in here. It wasn't really a glamorous life, that's for sure, but they were out here to make their fortune and just live rough how they had to. This here is a Rigididge authentic gold pan, and I've got one exactly the same as it, and you can see the ridges here. This is the ridges to stop the gold from coming out of your pan. I actually got my pan from this area of Moe as well, and it looks just the same as that. Gold has been found in considerable quantities in the district. That is a Gippsland Goldfields report from the 1860s. And of course, a boom of immigration occurred on the hunt for gold. In the 1850s, gold was found in Australia and in parts of Victoria. Omeo, Dargo, Woods Point, Walhalla were all locations that immigrants flooded into to find their wealth. The land was rough and harsh then, as McMillan noted on one of his expeditions. The scrub was so dense as to impede our progress very much. Another report from the time mentions that the country is exceedingly rugged and difficult to access. The rivers that flowed from the mountains and down into the valleys held wealth along the banks and under the ground, and major operations took place to mine this gold, transforming the region from not just a hub of pastoralism, but mining as well. And this is where I would have liked to come back in the day. This is the Cobb & Co Inn. This is where you'd get your beer, get your brandy, maybe a bit of whiskey, have a yarn with the fellas, go into the pub. Definitely has a strong history in this country, that's for sure. Here's a poem by Henry Lawson, The Roaring Days. The rough bush roads re-echoed, the barroom's noisy din, the troops of stalwart horsemen dismounted at the inn, and oft the hearty greetings and hearty claps of hands would tell of sudden meetings of friends from other lands. And this was around in the 1860s, and it was originally in Pakenham. There was a trail that ran from Dandenong to Sale, and this was in Pakenham, kind of at a stopping point where weary travellers could come and spend the night, have a drink, have a yarn. Yeah, I bet you I bet you this place has some stories to tell, that's for sure. Not a bad place to come and listen to some music. Oh, I'll have some of that, thank you. I'll chill there with me mates. The boot maker. Wouldn't mind a pair of those boots over there. Okay, so this is very interesting, and here you have a lot of surveyors' equipment. And the reason why this is interesting because surveyors really were explorers as well. You know, today when you think of a surveyor, you just think of someone going to measure someone's block of land, but back then they had to be bushmen. The surveyors were also synonymous with explorers back in the day who pushed into new areas in the frontier to survey the land to see if it would be okay for pastoralism or mining or logging and things like that. So very interesting to see this old surveyors equipment that they used back in the day. There was no, you know, GPS on your phone to measure out things back then. It's amazing what they were able to do and how they were able to calculate distances and write down on their maps. And I love this stuff, being in the CFA myself, so having a look at the old fire station here, and look at that for an old fire truck. And these were originally horse-drawn, fire buggies with the hoses on it. So incredible what they had to use to fight fires back in the day compared to what we do today. Interesting to see the canvas hoses, because we still use canvas hoses today, and they're great because they particulate, I think that's the word, because they kind of weep water, which means if they do go over hot ground, they're not as likely to burn and bust compared to the Duraline hoses. So that's what they used back in the day, and we still use that in the CFA. Now, how's this to watch a movie? Old theatre. Obviously this is 1900s, but it's just amazing coming in to a place like this and sitting here, and you could imagine that coming to watch a film, coming to watch the pictures as they called them, would have been, you know, a real special delight. Something that would be quite rare, you'd have to save your money for, and there wouldn't be much available. You wouldn't have many options of what you could watch, and we're just bombarded with entertainment today and live streaming and everything we want at our fingertips. I wonder if back then they appreciated a film more than what we do today, because it was just a lot more harder to come by and there was not as much variety. And even it's almost like it's a sanctuary where you come in and you sit in the dark room and you watch your film up there. That's how it was done. Today we're just watching things on our phones, and I wonder if it takes away kind of something special about it. But what I'd do to just go back in time for a day or a week or a month and experience what life would have been like back then. It's incredible walking on this little piece of history. As someone who's really fascinated with the history of Victoria and especially Gippsland. Gippsland was where a lot of the pastoralists first moved into in the early 1800s, and yeah, it's just amazing to think that they relocated these buildings to this place to keep that history and heritage alive. And so I think it's really special. All right, everyone, that's it for me. I hope you've enjoyed this little video, a little glimpse into the history of Gippsland. I'd highly recommend coming to this place, Old Gippstown in Maui. Pretty cheap entry, and if you're into history and you live in the nearby in the area, I just think it's good to come and learn some of this stuff. So yeah, I'd highly recommend it. Thanks for watching. Plenty more Australian history education videos coming in the future. Have a good one, guys.